So before we begin, I want to take a few minutes to talk about hypnosis, and not in a technical way and not in a dramatic way, but in a practical and grounded way, so that this way your mind knows what to do with this experience before we actually begin. And because hypnosis works best when your conscious mind has a general sense of what's happening and what is it required, most people come into a session like this with ideas that they've picked up over time from movies, from stage hypnosis, from stories that they've heard. And those ideas aren't wrong, they're just incomplete. So rather than have your mind quietly sorting through some assumptions later, we take a few minutes now to orient things properly. That way, when we move forward, your attention can stay with the experience itself instead of evaluating it. And another reason that this matters is because hypnosis doesn't suddenly start at a specific moment. It usually begins gradually as curiosity engages and as attention narrows. So, as the outside world becomes slightly less important, and interestingly, that process starts while we're talking about it. So, as you're listening now, you don't need to try to relax. You don't need to do anything special. This is simply an orientation that allows your mind to settle into how this experience typically unfolds. So, one of the first things that people often notice as they begin to relax is that they're still aware. They hear my voice, they notice their body, they may notice thoughts, sensations, or images, and sometimes that surprises them because many people expect hypnosis to feel like being asleep or unconscious or completely gone somewhere else. So a person might hear my voice and think, wait, I can still hear him. So something hasn't happened yet. What's interesting about that is that hearing the voice is usually one of the signs that the process is already underway. So hypnosis doesn't require awareness to disappear. It involves awareness, reorganizing. And when someone starts internally evaluating the experience, attention naturally shifts outward again. Not because anything went wrong, but because attention followed the thought. And attention is what we're working with here. And most people remain aware throughout hypnosis. Occasionally, someone goes into a very deep, very quickly, and later remembers very little. Other times, people remember bits and pieces. Both are simply different ways the mind organizes experiences. You may notice sounds as we go along, sounds in your space, sounds in my space, sounds you wouldn't normally pay attention to. And rather than pulling you out, those sounds usually do the opposite. They fade, they become a part of the background, like the hum of a refrigerator or distant traffic you stopped noticing a long time ago. They don't need to disappear. They just become less important as attention shifts inward. I remember working with someone who once became very aware of the sofa that he was sitting on. And that awareness concerned him. He thought he shouldn't be aware of it anymore. So I offered him a small nudge, a brief adjustment, something that took only a few seconds. Then I said, all right, back to the child. Three, two, one, be there. And when I asked him what he noticed, he was right there. Not because awareness had disappeared, but because his attention shifted. And that's often how this works. Another important thing to understand is how depth actually works. Many people imagine hypnosis as an off switch. Either you're in or you're out. But hypnosis doesn't work that way. It works more like a range. there's what I call wiggle room. And you can be deeply engaged and still respond and still talk, still think. Sometimes people notice that when they begin speaking, they feel slightly more alert, and that's normal. So talking engages a different part of the mind. And settling, if at any point settling a little deeper feels useful, that adjustment happens naturally. Depth isn't something that you force. It's something that the system calibrates on its own. And at some point, your mind may wander. It may drift into a thought, a memory, an image, or even a blank space. That's not a distraction, that's practice. Because wandering is how the mind rehearses movement. And this work involves movement. We move through time, through memory, through different perspectives. When the mind wanders, it's already doing what we'll be asking it to do. And when attention returns to my voice, many people notice they've settled even more fully. So hypnosis unfolds in waves. Awareness shifts, attention moves. People move in and out of these states naturally every single day, whether it's daydreaming, remembering, becoming absorbed. Your mind already knows how to follow that rhythm. And people sometimes wonder about control. It's helpful to think of this less as control and more as cooperation. Your conscious mind listens and notices, and your unconscious mind organizes experience. They work together. If something aligns, it moves forward easily. If it doesn't fit, it simply fades. The same inner intelligence that regulates breathing continues operating here. It doesn't disappear, it becomes quieter and more influential. Now, let's talk specifically about past life work. If I could say one word before the beginning of this kind of session, it would be trust. And trust has two parts. And as we move through this experience, I'll often ask, what do you notice? I'm not asking you to analyze. I'm not asking you to judge. I'm not asking you to decide what it means yet. I'm asking for the first thing that enters awareness, the raw information. Even if it feels subtle, even if it feels incomplete, even if it feels strange, meaning organizes itself later. So trust the way the information comes. Some people expect a movie, clear scenes, vivid details. Sometimes that happens, and sometimes information comes as emotion or sensation or simply knowing. None of these are better than the others. They're just different languages of the unconscious mind. And your unconscious already knows which language works best for you. And you don't need to try to make anything happen. You don't need to perform. Your role is simply to notice and report. Often, understanding arrives later. And people realize that something important began right here. So, as you sit here now, listening to what I'm saying, whatever is happening can continue to happen. And when you're ready, we'll move forward from here.